All right, let's dive in today. We're going to explore success, motivation, personal growth, all that good stuff.
Sounds like a plan.
Our source material today is a motivational speech by Eddie Pinero. It's called 3 Hours for the Next 30 Years of Your Life.
Catchy?
Definitely grabs your attention, right?
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to pull out those little golden nuggets, those actionable insights that we can actually
I'll
use
bet.
to unlock our own potential to, reach those goals that we all have.
Sounds good.
All right. So Pinero really hits hard on this idea of persistence.
He does, yeah. It's really at the core of his message, this idea that giving up is the only real failure.
Right. Like almost every other obstacle, every setback, it's all surmountable if you just keep pushing forward.
Exactly. He actually quotes Thomas Edison to drive this point home.
Hmm.
Edison said that a lot of people give up just when they're about to make a breakthrough.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And then he brings in a quote from the Dalai Lama, "The only way to fail is to quit."
Ooh, that's a good one. That really hits home, doesn't it? Just emphasizing the power we have to shape our own success simply by choosing not to give up.
Yeah, yeah. And what I think is really interesting here is that, persistence isn't always some grand gesture. You know,
Right.
it's really about those small, consistent actions, the steps we take even when we don't feel like it.
That's where the magic happens.
Exactly.
Makes me think of, those times when you're working on a project or learning something new and you hit a wall.
Yeah.
You get frustrated, you want to quit. But then something inside you says, just keep going.
I've been there so many times.
We've all been there. And when you push through that resistance, often, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely. You discover something new about yourself. You achieve something you didn't think you could.
Totally. Pinero also goes deep on this idea that discomfort and even failure, they're not things to be avoided. They're actually essential for growth.
He has a great analogy for this.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He compares life to a staircase.
Okay.
You know, each step up, that requires us to push into a little bit of uneasiness, even chaos sometimes.
I love that. It's like you can't just stand still on one step and expect to reach the top, right?
Exactly. Growth rarely happens when we're comfortable.
It's when we're stretching ourselves, pushing those boundaries. Pinero, he's really good at weaving in personal stories to illustrate his points.
Oh, yeah, his stories are so relatable.
He talks about those moments where he, felt like a loser, felt like he had failed.
Makes him seem human, right?
It does. It's like, okay, this guy gets it. He's been through it too. And the important part is he never let those setbacks define him.
Right, he picked himself up, dusted himself off, and kept going.
And he actually breaks down his process for navigating growth into 5 steps.
Okay, lay it on me.
All right, step 1, he says, you have to realize there's more out there, like more beyond your current comfort zone.
That's the first hurdle, recognizing that there's something more to strive for.
Right. Step 2 is finding the courage to step into that unknown space.
Takes guts.
It does. Step 3, be open to making mistakes, because those are just lessons in disguise.
Ooh, I like that. Mistakes as lessons.
Right. It takes the sting out of it a bit.
It does, yeah. It's a much more positive way to look at those inevitable stumbles we all experience.
Exactly. Okay, step 4, trust yourself. Trust your ability to learn and adapt.
Trust the process.
And finally, step 5, celebrate those wins, but also be willing to adjust your course as needed.
That's so important, being flexible and adaptable.
Because the path is rarely a straight line, right?
Exactly. It's full of twists and turns and detours.
Exactly. So it sounds like Pinero is giving us a really practical roadmap for, not just dealing with discomfort, but using it to move forward.
Totally. It's about turning those potentially negative experiences into fuel for growth.
Makes you wonder, how could we, reframe our own relationship with discomfort and failure?
It's a great question. Something we should all think about.
Another big point Pinero makes is about validation.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. He really stresses the importance of internal validation over constantly seeking external approval.
Right, like finding that confidence and sense of worth from within rather than relying on others to tell us we're good enough.
Exactly.
He tells the story about a time when he was laser focused on hitting his daily goals.
Okay.
He had them all written out on a whiteboard, and then he got this phone call that, like, reinforced that he was on the right track, that he was making progress.
External validation.
Yeah, and he realized later that he was maybe relying on that external validation a little too much.
It's easy to fall into that trap. We all want to feel like we're doing a good job, like we're on the right path.
Totally. But I think what Pinero's getting at is that true strength and confidence have to come from within. We can't always be looking to others for that reassurance.
Right. It's about cultivating that inner belief in ourselves, regardless of what others might say or think.
It makes you wonder, why do we often seek that validation from outside sources?
Yeah. What's at the root of that?
Maybe it's societal pressure, or maybe it's, experiences we've had where our self-worth got tied to like achievements or praise from others.
I think it's a mix of both. We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be doing, what we should be achieving.
Yeah, those external expectations can be tough to shake off. So how do we shift that focus inward?
That's the million-dollar question, right? How do we learn to validate our own efforts and celebrate our wins without needing someone else to tell us we're doing a good job?
It's about retraining our minds, I guess, to recognize our own worth and value.
And to find satisfaction in our own progress, regardless of external recognition. Pinero actually brings up Will Smith's book and shares a story about Smith's mother being hit by his father.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense story. And what Pinero takes from it is this idea that we had the power to choose how we react to external events. They don't have to define us.
That's powerful.
Like, we may not be able to control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond to those events.
We can choose our narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pinero uses this really interesting analogy to illustrate this point about adding an extra 22 seconds to his treadmill workout.
22 seconds. I like the specificity of that.
Yeah, right. But what he's really talking about is pushing beyond what we initially thought we were capable of.
Not for someone else's approval, but for our own sense of accomplishment.
Right. It's about proving to ourselves that we can do more than we might think we can.
And challenging those self-imposed limitations. It makes you wonder, what external validations am I holding myself back from?
Boy, that's a good one.
What could I achieve if I stopped seeking that external approval and just trusted my own inner compass? Pinero then dives into this topic that I think a lot of us struggle with, overthinking.
Oh, yeah, the analysis paralysis trap.
Exactly. And he really emphasizes simplifying action,
Yeah.
not getting bogged down by all the what ifs and maybes.
He uses his approach to workouts as an example. He says, no negotiating with weakness, just focusing on the next rep, the next set.
I love that. No negotiating with weakness. It's about silencing that inner critic that tells us we can't do it.
Exactly. It's about separating the task from the discomfort that we might associate with
Let's
it.
just get it done. I
Yeah.
love that. It makes me wonder, in what areas of my life am I overthinking things?
Yeah, where are we letting that why paralyze us?
What would happen if we just, took that first step, even if it felt uncomfortable or uncertain?
That's the key, taking that first step. Pinero then shifts gears a bit to talk about purpose.
Purpose, that's a big one.
Yeah, finding our purpose. And he argues that finding that purpose and then aligning our actions with it, that's key to feeling truly fulfilled.
Like, what are we here to do? And are we actually living in a way that reflects that purpose?
Right. He shares a very personal story about quitting his job
Oh, wow.
to start his YouTube channel. He talks about the risks, the self-doubt he experienced.
Yeah, that's a big leap of faith.
But ultimately, he found meaning in pursuing his passion.
So inspiring, right? It speaks to the power of taking a chance on yourself.
Absolutely. It's about believing in your dreams, even when others might not understand.
Have you ever felt that pull towards something you were really passionate about?
Many times.
Even if it meant, taking a risk.
Yeah, I think we all have.
It's scary, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. Pinero then brings up this idea of deep work, which comes from Cal Newport's book.
Ah, yes. Deep work. It's all about the power of focused, undistracted work.
Shutting out the noise.
Right. And he even suggests something really simple. Taking walks without your phone.
Just to, clear your head.
Yeah, to engage in deep thinking, to connect with your inner thoughts and ideas without the constant distractions of the digital world.
I love that. It's like a mini meditation.
Exactly. It's about creating space for reflection and allowing those creative juices to flow.
Okay, so Pinero throws out another really interesting concept. He talks about reframing rejection and criticism.
As opportunities for growth.
Yeah, it's like instead of seeing those experiences as setbacks, how can we use them to learn and improve?
He uses a great analogy. He compares it to an iceberg. He says that criticism is just the tip of the iceberg, while beneath the surface is this massive foundation of self-belief.
Wow, I love that analogy. So it's not about letting the criticism define us, but recognizing that it's just a small part of the bigger picture.
Right. And beneath that surface, that's where our true strength and resilience lie.
It's about remembering that our worth isn't diminished by setbacks or negative feedback. Instead, those experiences can help us grow.
Exactly. They can help us become stronger, more resilient.
Pinero shares this story about a listener who was passed over for a promotion. And he uses it to illustrate how we can transform those potentially negative experiences into something positive.
It's all about perspective.
Yeah. If we choose to see rejection as an opportunity for growth, then it can be just that.
Instead of dwelling on the disappointment, we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this to improve my skills or my approach?
It's about taking ownership of our growth, even when it's tough.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that, success is rarely a straight line. It's full of twists and turns and detours.
And sometimes those detours, those moments of rejection or criticism, they can actually lead us to something even better than what we originally planned.
Exactly. They can help us refine our goals, discover new paths, and ultimately become more resilient and resourceful.
It's about trusting that the journey, even with its bumps and bruises, is leading us exactly where we need to be.
Right. And that those experiences, even the tough ones, are shaping us into the people we're meant to become.
Okay, Pinero throws out another really cool concept. He calls it patchwork.
Patchwork. Okay, I'm listening.
He uses a story about the Goo Goo Dolls song Iris to illustrate this idea. Apparently, the song was written during a really difficult time for the band. They were going through a lot of personal and professional turmoil.
So Iris was born out of hardship. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and yet it became this massive hit. It resonated with people all over the world. And I think what Pinero's getting at with this idea of patchwork is that we can create something beautiful and meaningful, even from those seemingly random, disparate pieces of our lives.
Like taking all those different experiences,
Yeah.
both the good and the bad, and weaving them together into a tapestry that tells our unique story.
Exactly. And I love that he uses a song as an analogy because music has this incredible power to connect with us on such a deep level.
It speaks to the human experience, to our shared joys and sorrows.
Right. And just like a song can be made up of different melodies, different rhythms, different instruments, our lives are made up of all these different experiences that, when combined, create something unique and beautiful.
So we're all like walking, talking works of art.
Right. And each of us has this incredible potential to create something extraordinary from those seemingly random pieces of our lives. Makes you wonder, what are those pieces in my life?
Yeah, what are those seemingly insignificant moments, those experiences that have shaped me into who I am today?
And how can I use those pieces to create something that is meaningful and impactful? Pinero then brings us back to this idea of choice.
Choice. Such a powerful concept.
He tells the story about his friend Tom who got bitten by a snake.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But what was interesting is that Tom's reaction wasn't to, chase after the snake or dwell on the pain.
He didn't freak out or try to get revenge on the snake.
Nope. He focused on getting medical attention, on taking action to heal and move forward.
That's such a powerful analogy for how we can approach challenges in life.
Right. Instead of getting caught up in the blame game or dwelling on the past, how can we focus on what we can control?
On taking steps to heal, to learn, to move forward.
Pinero then shares a story that really stayed with me.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's about two brothers who grew up in an abusive home.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. And, one brother, he continues that cycle of abuse. He blames his past for his actions, for his choices.
He lets his past define him.
Right. But the other brother, he chooses a different path. He uses his experiences to become a loving and supportive father.
He breaks the cycle.
It's a powerful example of how, even in the face of incredible adversity, we have the power to choose our response.
Our past doesn't have to dictate our future.
It's a reminder that we're not victims of our circumstances. We have agency. We have the power to create a different reality for ourselves and those around us.
That's a really empowering message.
It is.
It's interesting. Pinero keeps circling back to this idea of internal strength.
Yeah, he does.
He shares another story about a time when he kind of missed his daily goals, and he found himself wanting, reassurance from others.
Looking for that external validation again.
Yeah. And it made him realize that he was still kind of leaning on that external validation a little too much.
So it's something they have to constantly be aware of.
Right. It's a process, not a destination.
It makes sense, though, right? We all want to feel like we're on the right track.
Totally.
Mm.
But I think what Pinero's getting at is that uh, we need to cultivate that self-reliance.
That ability to trust our own judgment, our own intuition, rather than constantly seeking that external stamp of approval.
Exactly. And, he actually brings in a line from Will Smith's book to really drive this point home.
Mm.
Smith writes, "You can hit me, but you can't hurt me."
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. And it speaks to this idea that we have the power to choose how we internalize those external events.
Like, the things that happen to us don't necessarily have to dictate how we feel or how we react.
Exactly. We always have a choice.
So how do we do that? How do we cultivate that inner strength and stop relying on external validation?
Well, I think the first step is awareness, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing when we're seeking that external validation and then, consciously choosing to shift our focus inward.
Okay, so like practical steps. What can we do to make that shift?
Well, Pino suggests, taking some time for introspection.
Like quiet reflection.
Exactly. Asking ourselves, what are the things that truly matter to me? What are my values? What are my goals? And then, making sure that our actions align with those things.
So it's about getting clear on our own internal compass.
Right. And then trusting that compass to guide us, even when it might lead us in a direction that others don't necessarily understand or approve of.
Pinero then shifts gears a bit and dives into this topic of overthinking.
Oh, yeah. That can be a real killer.
He talks about how, he approaches his workouts, no negotiating with weakness, just focus on the next rep, the next set, get it done.
It's about taking action.
Right.
Not getting stuck in that cycle of overanalyzing everything.
Yeah, I think so many of us get caught up in that. Like, we overthink things to the point where we end up not taking any action at all.
Right. And that's where that analysis paralysis comes in. We get so stuck in our heads that we never actually make any progress.
So how do we break out of that cycle? How do we move from overthinking to action?
Pinero suggests simplifying things. Breaking down those big, overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
So instead of looking at the whole staircase, just focus on the next step.
Exactly. And then once you've taken that step, focus on the next one, and so on.
It's about building momentum, right?
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Right. And not getting too caught up in the big picture. Just focus on what you can do right now in this moment.
Pinero then circles back to this idea of discomfort and chaos being necessary for growth.
Right. He reminds us that, stepping outside of our comfort zones is where the magic happens.
That's where we learn, where we stretch, where we discover new things about ourselves.
Exactly. And, he brings back that analogy of life as a staircase.
I love that analogy. It's so simple, yet so powerful.
It is. And he emphasizes that, each step up requires us to push into that discomfort, into that uncertainty.
So we can't just expect to reach the top without putting in the effort.
Right. We have to be willing to embrace the challenge.
And he reminds us that, growth is often messy. It's not always pretty, but it's in those messy moments that we often learn the most valuable lessons.
Exactly. And that's what makes the journey so rewarding.
Okay, Pinero then shares this really personal story about quitting his job to pursue his passion.
Yeah, I love that story. It's so inspiring.
It really speaks to the power of taking a leap of faith.
Even when it feels scary.
He talks about all the risks he faced, the self-doubt he experienced.
Yeah, but he also talks about the incredible sense of